Earlier this year, New York became the third US state to designate November 22nd as Kimchi Day, a day to celebrate and promote the consumption of the Korean national dish. Leading that resolution was a Korean-American Assemblyman Ron Kim. Mr. Kim is the first Korean-American elected to the New York State Legislature and has been serving in the Assembly representing the 40th District since 2012. I'm delighted to say that he joins us now via video for this week's Touch Base in Seoul. Mr. Kim, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I gave a brief introduction, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourself in your own words for our listeners and viewers?
Sure. I've been a public servant for the state of New York since I've graduated from college, and I have served in the state legislature since 2012, now serving out my fifth term, where I chair the Committee on Seniors in the state of New York.
So as you said, you've spent basically your entire adult life in public service. What led you to public service? What led you to become a member of the State Assembly in New York as well?
I was an immigrant kid that came to this country at the age of 7 from South Korea, the only child back in 1987 to immigrant parents who decided to come to Queens, New York from Seoul, South Korea. And I saw my parents as small business owners and immigrants struggle so much to get by when I was growing up. In fact, when I was just about to go to high school, I saw my father file for bankruptcy and shutting down his small grocery store in Manhattan. That moment left an indelible mark for me where I wanted to grow up and be a voice for immigrants and small business owners who never had the type of voice that they deserve in the American political system. And that led me to run for public office and eventually winning in the state assembly seat at the age of 31, I believe.
So you wanted to be a voice for immigrants. Is that your main area of interest as an assemblyman? What are your other interests? As you said, you also chair the Committee on Aging.
During COVID, we've learned how broken our healthcare system has been, especially toward older adults and the aging population. If you're a poor immigrant older person, that's a trifecta in this country where the system does not take care of you. All around the world, we're facing a crisis around older adults. But in this, COVID has exposed some of the worst conditions for this population. So I've been very hyper-focused last couple of years working on fixing the long-term care system that should take care of our most vulnerable members and give them an ability to retire with dignity in this country.
Sure, COVID, of course, hit the US hard, and especially New York as well. You've been a representative for the 40th District in New York for a decade now. That is quite the achievement. What has been the most rewarding moments during that time?
During COVID, I was able to expose some of the worst policies the governor of New York has made. And I stood toe to toe. It was a David versus Goliath moment. I am a local lawmaker taking on the most powerful Democrat, the top of the party of my Democratic Party, and we won. We took him on these issues because he made bad choices to protect industry profits over saving people's lives at the peak of the pandemic. And we called him out. We repealed the bad policies that led to more unnecessary debts and restored patient and nursing home and care facilities rights to recourse. This was a critical policy that we were implemented, and I feel the most proud that I was able to go head to head with the most powerful politician and won on the merits of the issues.
This was Governor Cuomo. It must have been a very difficult time, as rewarding as it was for taking on this battle and winning.
It was. It was extremely tough. It was a stressful time, especially for 1.5 second generation immigrant kid from Queens taking on one of the most recognized and celebrated politician in COVID. but we had to do the right thing. And some of my values as a Korean and Asian American, all that played a role in me finding the courage to push back and sticking up for the older American and Asian American and Korean Americans in my district.
Sure. So it sounds like you've dealt with a lot during your time, but what's still on your agenda list? Something that perhaps you've not been able to address yet, or what new issues are you now seeing?
Uh, Going back to some of the healthcare issues, right now we're focused on home care and community care. This is another part of the equation. Many of our older adults that are stuck in long-term facilities, about 20 to 25% of them don't need to be there if we have a functioning home and community care system in place. Unfortunately, so many of Asian immigrants are being exploited in the home care industry, where they're owed billions of dollars of back wages, and they're not receiving. So this is, unless we fix the core problems of why the home care system is broken, we will never get to the larger problem of an aging crisis that this country must address in the coming years.
It sounds like you're taking on some very important and weighty issues. But let's talk about one of your latest achievements that is perhaps a little bit more on the fun side. As we mentioned earlier, New York became the third US state to designate Kimchi Day following a resolution that you proposed. Can you tell us a bit more about how that came about?
Yeah, I've been working directly with some of the representatives from South Korea who have worked so hard and tirelessly to promote kimchi around the world as a healthy option for people all across this country and beyond. And for me, it's something deeply personal. Obviously, as a Korean and a Korean American, I grew up eating kimchi. As an immigrant, there were times when I was made fun of for smelling like kimchi and bringing kimchi dishes. That's like many immigrants have these stories all around the world to their
Sure.
public schools and cafeterias. And to have a moment like this at a time when Asians and Asian Americans have been targeted during COVID for violence and hate crimes, to have a moment of pride, to have kimchi in the halls of Albany. This is the capital of New York, where there aren't that many Asian Americans walking in this space. It was a moment for us to say, we don't need to just compete to fit in this country. We belong here. And kimchi, as a fun of a project as it was, left an indelible mark in the hallways of Albany, accepting Korean, Asian culture as every part of the American fabric, as any other type of food that came before us in that space.
What was the process like of getting this day recognized? Were there a lot of hurdles to go through? Was there any resistance?
We didn't have too much resistance. There were some other Korean American resolutions that we worked on in the past that had a little bit more resistance from other countries. For example, we work on recognizing Yugan Sun Day on the centennial celebration of Yugan Sun. That has some controversial opposition around it, but we were able to get it through. With Kimchi Day, we organized early enough and educated the public and lawmakers early enough where the day when we had to pass it, we passed it without any negative votes, and people not only passed it, but we dedicated a day to celebrate it in Albany, where many lawmakers came and learned about the process of making kimchi and why kimchi is such a popular dish around the world.
Right, and it's interesting because when you were growing up, when I was growing up, as you said, kimchi was perhaps a very foreign food for a lot of people. But now, all over the world, kimchi is far more recognized and celebrated already, right?
Absolutely. And this is a great thing for, I think, the Korean diaspora, where many of our culture and background is either reduced, undermined, and not recognized. But there is nothing more original and unique about kimchi that reflects the value and culture of Koreans and South and North Korea. This is something that both can agree. for change that and can come together to celebrate. So I think even though it's a fun project, I think the influence and the impact it has on the larger Korean culture is intangible.
Of course, it's still a few months away, but do you have plans ready for Kimchi Day already? And what do you hope people take away from it?
We have a whole coalition of leaders in New York that have put up some amazing events last year. We plan on working with them to make it even a larger event this year, and also start implementing other dishes, not just kimchi, but there's other dishes that go along with kimchi. I think people are already talking about, well, what do we promote some bibimbap now? Now that we got kimchi out there, and these are all, I think, positive things where for a change, instead of making fun or targeting Asian culture, we can uplift it and make it into an inclusive process where people from all across from different backgrounds can come together and enjoy this amazing dish.
Well, congratulations on getting the resolution passed, and we hope you have a great Kimchi Day in November. Before we let you go, what's next for you? What plans do you have next?
Well, I have my re-election. It's my sixth term. Every 2 years, we have a competitive race, but I plan on winning big and continuing representing the people of New York here.
Well, we sincerely wish you luck on that. And also thank you for everything you're doing to promote Korean culture as well. We've been speaking to New York State Assemblyman Ron Kim. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you so much.